Are you suffering with a habit that's become destructive, or maybe you know someone whose habits are impacting you or your family?
A secret that is becoming increasingly out of control, or maybe even a full-blown addiction to alcohol, drugs, gambling, food, social media, shopping or pornography.
I'm Emma Heath and this is my colleague Jules Radford. Over these testimony sessions, people involved with the National Recovery Course are going to bring you the Recovery Course testimonies, real people, real stories and real transformation. The Recovery Course follows the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, yet as they were originally intended. A set of 12 spiritual steps where we put Christ back at the heart of recovery. We will cover one step in each of these sessions. We recognise that our destructive habits are a consequence of pain, hurt, a broken relationship, loneliness, or an issue from childhood. The truth is, we all carry pain, and it's been hard to become an adult without carrying some of the baggage of life. We know that identification is key when addressing struggles, and what better way to bring hope than to share in people's stories of how they have been set free from the trap of addiction, compulsive behaviours and habits. We've had a bit of a roller coaster ride over the last few weeks, facing up to the things that we have been denying, realising that we need the help of God, our higher power, taking stock of our lives, sharing this with someone, getting ourselves ready for change and reaching out to God to help us change. Wow, that is a lot of ground to cover, and some of you are probably feeling a little bit exhausted. That's okay, as we are dealing with some tough stuff. Some of these things we will need to keep coming back to though.
Today, we build on the previous steps by looking at step 8. We made a list of all the persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Admitting we're wrong can be really difficult, and so we need to be willing to take accountability for where we have done wrong. A top tip based on my own experience is to not procrastinate, but just start the list. Don't worry about trying to get it right. Just get it started and keep it in a place where it's private but easily accessible from anywhere. For example, I started mine on my iPad so I could add to it whenever I thought of someone or something. And don't be surprised if the lists get long. Making amends is something to do over time, not all by the end of step 9. When things start feeling a little bleak as you are writing, that may feel like an ever-expanding list. Remember that it's not a person's mistakes which define them, it's the way they make amends. The Bible in Luke 6:37 reminds us, do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. It's an amazing thing that as we start forgiving others, we will find it easiest to ask for forgiveness. So go on, give it a go, and watch the hurts, resentments and bitterness start slipping away, paving the way for a life worth living.
We know that there is hope, no matter how dark things can feel. We encourage you to listen with an open heart to the testimonies each week and see how God can and will transform even the most hopeless of situations. He did it for me, he's done it for Jules, and he can do it for you. We will now hear a short testimony from Josh, who I met when he came to a recovery course 6 years ago and is a shining example of how God has changed his life through the recovery course.
Hi everyone, my name is Josh and I'm here to share my story today in the hope that encourages you to try and tackle your problems and your own addictions by coming along to the recovery course. So my story begins in school, and when I was 14 years old I was exposed to pornography. Something at the time I didn't know was harmful and dangerous, but gradually over my teenage years things started to get out of control. And it got to the point where I felt so hopeless and so helpless. But one day I found this recovery course at St. Swithin's Church in Bournemouth. And I decided to go along. And at first I couldn't look anyone in the eye, but gradually I started to find fellowship, food and friendship, and it transformed my life completely. And today I want to talk about step 8, which is about finding those people that you've done wrong to and that you've harmed. And it's about setting out to forgive them and to make peace with them. And I truly believe in a God that can do that. I first went along to the recovery course, and for me, at first, I was unsure, but then it transformed my life. And from then on in, I went to every single recovery course that's ever been done, and eventually I started to help out. And I saw men and women walk through that door who were heavy burdened by their shame. But by the end of the course, they completely transformed their life. They began to look to their higher power, and they found God, and they found Jesus, and their lives were completely transformed. And that gave me hope that I can overcome anything in my life, that anything is possible. Something that really helped me was hearing really powerful testimonies from people whose lives are broken and shamed, and they stood on that stage and they spoke the truth, they spoke the Bible, and that really spoke to me. I would encourage you that you should find a recovery course that's near you, because they will welcome you in with open arms. They won't shame you, they won't look at you funny. They will look at you with care and compassion. And with the human dignity of a smile, anything can happen. So thanks for listening today, and I hope that helped someone.
So we are now joined by my dear friend Lauren Windle, who she's got an amazing story which she is going to share with us today, and her involvement also with the recovery course. And Lauren is a journalist and also author, writing an amazing book as we speak. So she's a very talented young lady, but has come through a real journey to be with us today. So I'm going to hand over to you, Lauren. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So, as you said, I am a journalist and I'm in recovery. My addiction, my sort of drug of choice was cocaine and alcohol. And for me, I had always found growing up that I was always just on the outside of everything. And whether I was or not, that was always my perception. I didn't quite feel welcome. I didn't quite feel good enough. I always felt anxious. I always wanted to be liked and more popular, and those things were really important to me. And I always felt like I was missing the mark. So when I got to teenage years and alcohol started to be around a little bit more and people were offering me things and I could get my hands on alcohol, I remember first getting drunk and thinking like, well, two things. One, I was more outgoing and happy to speak to people, and I felt like I could communicate better. But the other was that I suddenly didn't care if I was communicating badly. So it meant that I just felt this sort of pressure off, this release, this temporary break from that anxiety. And when I finished university, I went through a really difficult breakup with somebody who I had thought I was going to be with for a long time, and that didn't work out. And that left me really devastated. And there was so much codependency, so much control in that relationship. And it left me sort of feeling a bit empty and unsure of what I was going to do and who I was going to be. So I got this job in hospitality where people drink and take drugs really heavily, and there's this really sort of like work hard, play hard. You can't socialize normally because those hours are when you're working, so you socialize after hours and it all gets really gritty. And I was in that environment and people started offering me cocaine, and I just accepted. By the time I realized that I'd made a bad decision, my ability to make the decision whether or not to take it was gone, and I was very much locked in this dependence. And I was aware of that really early. I could see that I was losing control, and I would say to myself, no, tonight you're just going to drink, or tonight you're just going to have 2 glasses of wine, but you're not going to take drugs. And it was such a clear pattern that I would be there and I'd have my second glass of wine, and then I'd go and get another bottle of wine, and then I'd call a dealer, and then I was up until, my friends would go home at 2 o'clock when the bar closed, but I'd stay out. I'd go to another club, to a late night club. I'd call another dealer. I'd go home. I'd find an after party. I'd still be awake on my own at midday the next day, taking drugs, drinking, smoking cigarettes. And the horrible, horrible thing about cocaine is that nothing is ever enough. There's no way to satisfy that itch. You can't drink enough, you can't smoke enough, you can't get enough actual cocaine, you can't chat enough, talk enough, you can't anything. It's just not enough. Nothing satisfies you. And you just feel that sort of guilt and that, and that's all tinged with this feeling that you're never going to do it again. But you know that come the next day, you're just going to restart that cycle, and you wonder if that's just your life, you know.
So I so get that, because it's you're just saying my story to a T, and that part of addiction where you vow that you're never ever going to do this again, and you mean it with your whole heart, and then completely baffled when the following day or the following hour you're doing it again.
Oh,
and I love smiling because my background is hospitality. I only chose my degree because there was wine tasting on a Friday, you know, and falling into that trap of university when you've got addiction bubbling away is awful. So
terrible.
What happened next?
I spiraled really quickly. I got physical symptoms. I got floaters in front of my eyes. I got numbness in my fingers and toes. I was tired and angry and exhausted all the time. I didn't know if I was depressed or if I was just up with drugs and down with drugs. And there was no way of knowing because I didn't detox my body long enough to know how I was actually doing. I was just so focused on drinking and taking drugs, and my work life spiraled. I was late. I was a very difficult person to work with, but I got to a really desperate place, and I was out for dinner with some friends, and I'd gone to pick up 2 grams of cocaine and came back to the dinner, and none of them took drugs. That was just for me. But I thought we were going to a club later, but by the time I'd gone and picked up drugs and come back to the restaurant table, they'd said, oh, you know, it's a Thursday night. We've had such a lovely time. Like, we'll finish these drinks and then we'll go home, which is a totally normal thing to do, you know, on a Thursday night, to go home at 10:30 or whatever. But I thought we were going out for a big night. I'd obviously got these drugs and I was really disappointed. So I went home on my own, called an ex-boyfriend who came and sat up with me till the early hours, and we finished these 2 grams. And I did my last line of cocaine at about 7:30 a.m. when my alarm went off to tell me to go to work. And I just called my boss and said, I'm high, I'm not coming. So she said, okay, I'm gonna say that you're not feeling great today, and we'll talk about this later. And then I called my sister, and my sister wasn't into drugs. She didn't make bad decisions. I said to her, I need your help. I am taking cocaine and I don't know how to stop. And she moved me out of my flat and into her home, and she took me to church, and she typed up a resignation letter for work and sent me into work that Monday, and said, you need to hand in your notice. And she said, well, what are you going to do now? And at that dinner with those friends, one of my friends was over from Paris, where she'd moved, and we were in a French restaurant, and she had translated 2 words on the menu. Underneath one of the steaks, it said like à partager. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And she was like, oh, that means to share. And I was like, that is so cool. She can speak another language. And I just had these visions of being like this beautiful French person trotting around Paris and whatever. So I moved to Paris, and I continued working freelance for the same company, but from Paris. And they allowed me to do that from home. And I lived there for a while, and I had a group of friends who were amazing, very supportive. They didn't take drugs. They enjoyed alcohol in a very sort of grown-up French way. They liked a glass of wine with their meal, but they knew when to stop. And there, my drinking, like juxtaposed by their normal enjoyment of a glass of wine, it was so amplified. It was so clear I had a problem, because they did not get drunk like I got drunk. And it was so clear that I had a problem. And then I started dating someone who brought me cocaine. And that's when my friends said, enough's enough. And they tracked down a recovery group meeting.
And that must have been really scary, because you've been living that life for so long. So is that when your recovery journey really began?
Yeah, that was the tipping point from addiction to recovery. And at first I was like, okay, I'm just going to see how this goes. I'll do 2 days. I'll do today, like this hour, I'm not going to drink. And I would like watch the clock. And I'd be so grateful when it got to bedtime, because I'd be like, I've done a whole day. And I went to a meeting every day. And on the third day, I went to a meeting that was based on step 3, where they talk about higher powers. And I sort of realized I've got to work out what my higher power is. I've got to work out what that means. And I had been raised going to church, and I hadn't enjoyed that. But I just kept thinking, like, I guess I should find out a bit more about Jesus then. So I turned up at a church on the Sunday. So I was 4-5 days sober at this point. And they said, does anyone want prayer at the front? And I went to the front and I said to the vicar, I'd like some prayer, please. And he said, okay, yeah, sure. Is there anything in particular? And I said, I'm a cocaine addict and I haven't taken cocaine for 4 days. And he said, okay, I'm going to ask you to take a seat. Just going to stop you for a sec. I'm just going to grab a few more people. So 3 of them gathered round and prayed for me. And one was this woman who invited me to a women's Bible study. And that was such a pivotal part of my recovery, was learning about faith. Where things got really exciting when I came back to London, and I had gotten past that sort of white knuckling stage, and I had worked the 12 steps of recovery once with a sponsor who I've met through those meetings. And then I thought, I really need to give something back. I really want to connect with people. And that's when I called up a big church in London who I'd heard had done this recovery course. And they said, yes, that's something we were involved in. We're not doing it at the moment, but let me give you the number of someone else who's running it at their church. And that's when I found the recovery course. And that's when I plugged in with these guys. And that's when my faith and my recovery really married together. And that was so exciting for me.
Like, looking back, we're obviously talking a little bit about amends today. Maybe can you share with us something that happened around your sort of step 8 part of your journey around amends that you'd like to share with us?
So for me, I apologise to some of the people I'd worked with, because as I said, I was a difficult colleague. I didn't turn up on time. And there was one person who was in my office who I just thought wouldn't respond well. I thought that she would be a bit sort of smug about it. We'd had conflict. And that there's that person who you sort of butt up against and you think, like, I'd rather just never speak to you again than call you to apologise, because you'll love it. You'll be so pleased that you've got this thing up on me, whatever. Like, I just thought, yeah, I'm really through gritted teeth going to do this. And I contacted her and I said, like, I know I was hard to work with and I'm sorry. And I didn't say you were hard to work with too, anything, because it's none of my business. That's it. I was hard to work with. I didn't show up on time. I didn't support you as a colleague. I made it you versus me. And I'm sorry for that. And that was wrong. And the grace, she's not Christian, but the grace she showed me, I was blown away by. She was like, I think it's incredible that you've just said that. Thank you so much. And I just thought, like, this is so worth it. And there are loads of those stories through my sort of recovery journey, times where I've pulled things back, or, and I've taken those steps and I've followed those guidelines. And it's gospel, it's in the Bible, even though it's laid out quite sort of systematically, because some of us just need that because we can't work it out without rules. And I needed those rules, but it's, lay everything down, leave the temple, go and make amends before you come to God. And doing that changes things. It changes things for them, but more importantly than that, changes things for you, and it was a huge part of me moving forwards.
That's such an encouragement to us to hear that, Lauren. I mean that. So obviously you said about being involved with the recovery course as well. That's been amazing for you. I know I've seen your journey develop and unfold. Yeah. How's that impacted your life? And also, can you give us some encouragement for those watching as to what they can do if maybe they're struggling or unsure of the next step? Just some of your wisdom would be amazing.
Yeah. So engaging with the recovery course, as I said, sort of combined those two things. And I came I did a sort of bit of training at one church where I came on as a guest, but also helped out bits and pieces with the leading. And then we set it up at my church, which is St Dionysus in Parsons Green in London. One time, like, I got an email from a bloke who'd cycled over to church high, he'd been taking crack, and he burst through during a service, so not even recovery course, just burst in high. And one of the guys on the back was like, oh, I better get Lauren, and came and got me. We chatted with him, we prayed with him, and he came just to one session of the recovery course. And then he left, and I didn't hear from him. And then a year later, I got an email, and he said, you planted a seed. And I actually he joined a different support network through church that I wasn't involved with, but he'd gone and found them nearer to where he lived. And he was like, I'm now sober and clean. And that was just incredible. The transformation in people, like even in myself, I don't even relate, my life. I have things in my life that I couldn't have dreamt of when I was using, because I didn't know life could be that good. I didn't dream that big. Life to me was small. What I would say is, I don't know anyone who's gotten into recovery without asking for help. It is available to you if you reach out and ask for help, if you take the advice, if you take the tools you're given, if you plug into the recovery course, if you plug into the step work, if you plug into the Bible. It's all there for the taking, and your life is so worth it. That's when opportunity comes, and whatever that opportunity looks like, it's exciting and it's there, and it's like, it's what we're here for, and I just think it's worth fighting for.
Brilliant. Bless you, Lauren. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I just know that there'll be someone out there watching this that this has really impacted. So if that is you today, contact us through the following details, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week, where we will continue this recovery course series, hearing from amazing people from around the country, sharing their stories of hope and restoration. And thanks again, Lauren.
Thank you.
And take care. So this week we see that we need to start preparing to make amends and get ourselves right with the people that we have wronged. Whilst you can't take back what you've done, you can make it right. Whilst no one looks forward to making amends to those we've harmed, with God's help, you can do it.
If the thought of making amends is making you super anxious, talk about this in your small group, as I guarantee you won't be the only one feeling anxious, and perhaps you can help support each other. The great news is that the recovery course is being run all over the country and online. If you want to find out more, you can watch the full TBN Recovery Course series, visit our website www.therecoverycourse.com, or you can email us at info@therecoverycourse.com, or follow us on any of the social media platforms.
Join us next time for session 9, where we look at the 9th step. We look forward to seeing you then. Goodbye from us both.
Goodbye.